Shalom, and welcome to our weekly study on the Torah portion, the Parsha. This week's Torah portion is found on the book of Bamidbar, that is the book of Numbers, in chapter 25, verse 10, to chapter 30, number 30, verse 1. And we're going to talk a little bit about what this Parsha, what subjects this Parsha talks about. And the main subject and the reason the Parsha is called Pinchas is because it talks about Pinchas and how Pinchas was elevated to the level of a Kohen. A Kohen is a priest. He was a Levite, but because of what he did, which was actually a cleansing in some way, he was elevated to the level of Kohen. And we're going to touch a little bit the subject in depth as well, and to see what forces were behind the act that when we read the Torah, it says, that Pinchas basically killed a member of or I would say not only a member, he was a prince of the tribe of Shimon, and he was committing I would say, adultery or idolatry by being together with a woman from another people, and falling into the trap set by two characters that we mentioned in the Parsha before, which is Bilam and Balak. And Pinchas then, by killing these two individuals, not Bilam and Balak, but I'm talking about the individual from the tribe of Shimon and the woman from the other nation, he cleansed basically the people of Israel, who at this time were having a plague happening in their midst because of the idolatry and the actions they were doing with these women from another nation. And we're gonna touch that subject. It's gonna be the main subject. So after Pinchas is rewarded because of being basically a zealot, a person that was a defender of what Moshe and Aaron and Miriam started, he's rewarded with the covenant of peace and the priesthood. And we're gonna talk about what is the covenant of peace and why he was rewarded with the priesthood. Okay. We also gonna see in this parsha that another census is taken, and this census is between the ages of 20 and the ages at the age of 60. And also, we're not gonna talk about the census in this in this lesson, but there's also another subject that is touched in this parsha, and is that Moshe divides the land using a lottery. So the land wasn't gonna be given by Moshe, and the tribe of Benjamin is gonna live here, Judah is gonna live there. No, it was gonna be through a lottery. In that way, there will be no favoritism, right? And that leaves, the question, which also is another subject we're not gonna touch in the lesson. It leaves open a question open that is going to be open for us to ask, what does a lottery mean? Because in the future we're going to see the subject of lottery. When it comes to Yom Kippur, there's a lottery, and when there's two goats, one is for Hashem, and the other one's for Azazel. And also we're going to see in the future is also a lottery in reference to the book of Esther, in which there's a lottery for what day the Jews were going to be eliminated from the midst of the Persian Empire. right? So what's the meaning of lottery? That's something for a different lesson, because that would take a long time to explain. But keep that question in your mind, and try to find references. There's plenty of references, especially in the internet, plenty of references about the lottery. uh, there's a subject that we're gonna touch in this parsha, and it's the 5 daughters of Selafhat. And these 5 daughters of Selafhat are said to petition Moshe that they be granted the portion of the land that belonged to their father. And their father died without a son, So basically, what we're gonna see is that they get accepted and they get the inheritance. And but what is the meaning? Because this is a spiritual subject, just like everything in the Torah is a spiritual subject, but this one has a special meaning in it. And why necessarily we have 5 daughters? Why not 2? Why not 3? Why the Torah give us 5 daughters? And the mystery behind this number 5, and the feminine aspect of these 5 daughters. So also in the portion, what we're gonna see is that Moshe empowers Yehoshua to succeed him as the leader of the people and to lead them into the land of Israel. Because you guys remember Moshe, by striking the rock twice, he was actually not given the privilege of leading the people to the land of Israel, or entering the land of Israel with the people. So that was a consequence of his action of anger, and at that moment. And we're gonna see here once again anger, and this time we're gonna touch anger in a different perspective. What kind of anger Hashem was accepting this time that didn't accept from Moshe, right? The other subject that the Parsha talks about is about the daily offerings and all the offerings or additional offerings that were supposed to be given in the holidays, including the day of Shabbat. So we'll talk to you about the new months. We'll talk to you about Shabbat, the Sabbath, and also we'll talk about the offerings for Passover, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shemini Atzeret, and this is all in that parsha. So we go from Pinchas, a subject about zealotry and making things right by using an action that is considered din, gevurah, and then we're going to offerings to the Creator. Different subjects here, because we also have a census and a change of leadership basically as well. So let's start with the parsha, and let's read a little bit. So Pinchas ben Eliezer ben Aharon HaKohen. So that's how the parsha start, mentioning the name of Pinchas, and it says Pinchas, son of Eliezer, son of Aharon, the Kohen. So it gives you basically, like, if you will, 2 last names. Son of Eliezer, that means he was son of one of Aharon's sons. That means that he was Aaron's grandson. Okay, so then he mentions son of Aharon. So what we have here is basically that Pinchas, even though he was a representation of Din, of justice, he was basically from the side of Chesed, because Aharon was basically Chesed. He was basically from the side of mercy and the tree of life. So what it tells us is the following. Let me go here. There were two people in the previous Parsha that tried to curse the children of Israel. But there was one of them that couldn't. And if you guys remember, those are Balak and Bilam. And Bilam, when he tried to curse the people, he couldn't. The only thing that came out from his mouth was a blessing. And not only a blessing, there was even a prophecy about the future, how this nation was going to grow and be powerful. And because of that, they couldn't curse the children of Israel. They have a plan, and the plan was basically to send daughters of the nation that they belong to the children of Israel. In that way, they will be open to the forces of Tumah, to the forces of impurity, by mixing themselves, by having these illicit relationships with these daughters of this other nation, right? So what we see is the following. The children of Israel fall into the trap. They actually start not only mixing themselves with these daughters of this other nation, but also they start worshiping the God of that nation. And there was this plague basically among the children of Israel because of the idolatry. Remember, we mentioned before in other parshas that what brings plague in the midst of the children of Israel was always the Lashon Hara and idolatry. And that's something, that we're going to continue to see throughout, our study on the Torah. In this case, there was this character called Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, who saw a person who was a leader of one of the tribes of Israel. And this person was called Zimri. And Zimri was actually with a woman called Cosbi from another nation, and they were engaging in illicit relationships openly. So Pinchas got basically, for lack of a better word in English, got really angry, and he took a spear and he pierced both of them while they were in the act. And that actually means, according to Jewish law, if you kill someone like that, you are actually supposed to be dead as well, right? So according to the tradition, the whole tribe of Shimon wanted to kill Pinchas because he killed one of their leaders, right? However, by decree of the Creator said, I will give him the covenant of peace. The covenant of peace means, that no one can basically kill Pinchas because of what he did. But like I mentioned before, whenever we see something in the Torah that says this person killed this nation was basically killed or was run over or erased from the land by the children of Israel, can be taken literally if you read the Torah literally, but it can also mean something different. It can also mean some type of way of the force of creation working, or force of correction working through the children of Israel. In this case, Pinchas, we need to see that Pinchas is kind of like a force of correction, a force that is restriction, that will stop something from happening, right? While Zimri, he was a head, a rosh, and was with a woman from another nation, which is an impure desire to receive. So when you have this mix of pure, which is a prince of rosh, and impure desire to receive, meaning something that doesn't fit this, in in the step of correction, there has to be a restriction. Something needs to stop in order to make this a force that will be receiving properly and will purify the whole parsuf, the whole system. So this is what you need to see here. Pinchas killing Zimri and Cosby doesn't mean necessarily that there was a real killing or something like that. In fact, most Kabbalists will tell you the Torah should not be taken literally. The Torah is basically what it says. Torah is an instruction. It's a kind of symbolic or a poem, or in some cases you can ask some Kabbalists that will tell you the Torah is a whole song, a very long song, and that's why we sing the Torah when we read the Torah on Shabbat, because it's a song according to them. So it is something symbolic, something that needs to happen. It's not only written there, maybe happened historically. There's no proof of it, right, historically, but it's written for some reason, and we should take it as instruction. What does that mean? Where's the Pinchas inside me? Where's the Zimri and the Cosby inside me? Because these are forces that are inside us that we need to correct. Okay, so it says, and this is from Rabbi Yaakov Abu Haseira, and later I'm gonna read from the Arizal. But Rabbi Yaakov Abu Haseira, he actually is using teachings from the Arizal. I'm gonna read the Arizal so it is more clear what actually Rabbi Yaakov Abu Haseira is trying to say here. But he's saying that the soul of Pinchas, when he performed that act, was basically filled with other souls, and these souls include the souls of Nadav and Avihu, who were rooted according to the Arizal and the soul of Cain. Specifically, they are external light. External light is actually the Or Makif, the part of the soul that surrounds a person. And Pinchas was rooted in the soul of Eliyahu, and the soul of Eliyahu is the Or Pinimi, which is the internal light, and that's the part of the soul that enters a person. Therefore, when the soul of Nadav and Abihu entered Pinchas, he gained the external parts of the soul, which now completed the inner part of his soul that he already possessed, which is the soul of Eliyahu. So, let me read a little bit here. So, let's read once again. Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aharon, the Kohen, turned back my wrath from upon the children of Israel when he avenged my vengeance among them. So I did not consume the children of Israel in my vengeance. Therefore say, behold, I give him my covenant of peace. So there's words here, Lachen Omer, and this is the last sentence, Lachen Omer, Hineni naten lo et beriti shalom. Therefore say, behold, I give him my covenant of peace. We're gonna pay attention to therefore say, which is Lachen Omer. So Lachen Omer, the word Omer, spelled with a vav, is here spelled with a vav. If you rearrange that word, it can actually be spelled Orom Orem, which is another abbreviation of Or Makif. Or Makif is the external surrounding light. The word Shalom, written here in this verse, the covenant of peace given to Pinchas, with a split vav, may be read as Shalim, which is completion. In other words, now that Pinchas has gained the external light, he has internal light, which is Eliyahu. Now he gains this external light, which is alluded by the souls of of Nadab and Abihu, now he's completed, right? So that's why he is able to do this rectification. So what kind of rectification he was doing? Because we see here, for example, when we read, we have the word, he avenged my vengeance, and also he says here, basically the word vengeance is mentioned three times. So this is what's happening. He made what is called 13 rectifications in the male aspects of the spiritual world. This is takes place using the 13 attributes of mercy. And how this works is the following. When Moshe came to ask for Hashem to be merciful towards the Jewish people, he mentioned the 13 attributes of mercy. And then Hashem was filled with mercy towards the Jewish people. We are promised that when we mention these 13 attributes of mercy, we will not be turned away empty-handed. This is on Rosh Hashanah 17b. So the 13 attributes of rectification of the male aspect are from Bina to Malchut, and this is within the Sephirah Chokmah, as well as the 6 Sephirah from Chesed to Yesod, and this is within the Sephirah Keter. And each of these Sephirah has an inner and outer light or dimension, and each of these Sephirot are rectified by different ones, by different of any of these 13 attributes. So this is how it goes. There are 8 Sephirot within the Sephirah Chokmah. The main Sephirah, which is the inner light, in this case will be Bina. The Sephirah that will be completing this inner light in the Parsuf is Malchut, and it corresponds to the attribute of mercy called El, or translated God. The other inner light that we're going to find is Chesed, and the outer light that corresponds to it or completed is Yesod, and that's correspond to the attribute of mercy called Rahum, or merciful. The next one is Geburah, completed by Hod, and this is by the attribute of mercy called gracious. Ve Hanon. Tifaret is completed by Nesach, which is Erech, which is long and enduring. Nesach is completed by the outer light of Tiferet, which is Afaim, which is patient. The inner light Hod is completed by the outer light Geburah, which is completed by the attribute of mercy, abundant, and kindness, Berav Chesed. Yesod, the inner light of Yesod, is completed by the outer light of Chesed, called the Emet, truth. The inner life of Malchut is completed by the outer light of Binah, which is corresponding to the attribute of mercy, guards kindness, Netzer Chesed. And this is inside the Sephirah Chokmah. So these are the rectifications that from the male aspect that was happening, or it's the symbolism of Pinchas doing what he did. So this involved, like I said before, a Sephirah from Bina to Malchut within the Sephirah Chokmah, but also involves the 6 Sephirah from Chesed to Yesod inside Keter. And inside Keter, this is how it works. So the inner light of Chesed is completed by the light of Yesod and correspond to the attribute of mercy of Netzer Chesed, which is guard kindness, and Geburah is completed by Hod, which is for Le Alafim, which is for thousands, and Tifaret is completed by Nesach, and bears iniquity, which is Nisa Avon, And Netzach is completed by Tifaret, which is and transgression. Besha. Hod is completed by Geburah and bears sin. Hata. Yesod, the inner light of Yesod, is completed by the outer light of Chesed, which is and cleanses. Venaka, or Venake. And if you notice, these Sefirot are basically like you have a high Sefirot, in this case, in Keter, the one that I just mentioned, we have Chesed, and then we have a lower Sefirot of Yesod, and then we have Geburah, and then we have Hod. And it's because the inner light begins with the highest Sefirot, and the outer light begins with the lowest Sefirot. And this is something that we touch base in our intermediate Kabbalah lessons, in which we talk about the inverse relationship between light and vessel, where the simplest light is the first one to get inside the vessel. And this is why it is this way. But how do we know that Pinchas was actually completing these basically corrections within himself, and how these souls that represent external light and the soul of Eliyahu, which represents the internal light, was within him when he did this action of correction? And for that we need to go to the Shar HaGilgul, written by the Arizal, not written by the Arizal, but written by one of his disciples, Chaim Vital. And what he mentions is the following. He mentions that when Pinchas was born, Urias, Eleazar, son of Aharon, took a daughter of Otiel for a wife, and Pinchas was born. That's in Shemot chapter 6, verse 25. Or rabbis say that Potiel is Joseph, who controlled his evil inclination. This is Yetro, who fattened calves for idol worship. The sod of the matter is that when Pinchas was born, he incorporated from two souls. He was incorporated from two soul sparks. This is Potiel, a language of drops. It comes to drops inside tiput in Hebrew, because he was from two drops of soul, one spark from the root soul of Yosef Hasadik, and the second spark from the root of the soul of Yetro. The level of these two souls is called Pinchas. Do not be surprised how the sparks of Yetro combine with the sparks of Yosef, because you already know that Yosef is in Yesod, from which flows the drops of seed of all Hasidim and Geburot combined within it. Therefore, there is no reason for surprise about how it can be combined. A soul spark in Yetro, which is from one root, with a spark from the root of Yosef. So Hasidim and Geburot, when you join these two, they create balance. They create basically what is called beauty, Tifaret. They create a center column. Okay, thus Pinchas received a spark from the root of Yetro, which was the level of inner light of the Nefesh of Adam Harishon from Atzilut. After that, when Nadab and Abihu died because of the incident of the incense offering in which they sinned, and after the matters of Pinchas in which he killed Simri, he merited to have entered him the souls of Nadab and Abihu, which were the level of the external light of Adam of Atzilut. This came to him since he already had a spark from the root of Yetro, from the inner light of the Nefesh of Atzilut, the Nefesh of Atzilut, to become completed in Pinchas, consisting of inner light and surrounding light. The inner light entered him besod and in actual reincarnation when he was born, and the enveloping light with surrounding light entered him besod ibur only after he was born and grown. So Besod means actually an actual reincarnation. So he was an actual reincarnation. Besod Ibu is after a person is born, these souls are added to the person. So that's basically what Shar Hagilgum, Shar Hagilgum, tell us. So the personification of these of the attributes of these souls became personified in Pinchas, and they were at that moment working all together, and that's the reason why he was given the covenant of peace. That's the reason he was elevated also to the level of a Kohen. He was giving basically his act of restricting this Tuma, which was already, getting inside the people of Israel. He was the person that shut the door. And if you remember when we talked before about the way the tribe, the Israeli tribes are basically camping around the tabernacle, the way that these tribes actually are supposed to be, some of them like a barrier against the forces of Tuma, also implies that they are susceptible, or they're more inclined to the forces of Tuma. In this kind, Shimon was inclined towards the side of Geburah. If he's inclined to the side of Geburah, or if he is from the side of Geburah, that means that he is more open to these forces of Tuma. And that's the reason why the head of the tribe of Shimon committed this act with this woman from another nation. And this is the reason why you have a person like Levi, who also a person from the tribe of Levi, who is also Geburah, and he needed to make the correction by killing this type of act, or killing or closing the door to the forces of Tuma. And the plague stopped after that. And therefore, he, by performing that action, he stopped also the vengeance of that is mentioned 3 times in this Parsha, the vengeance of God. So we're going to talk now about the 5 daughters of Zelophehad. And the reason we're going to talk about this is because it has something to do as well with the aspect of Din, the aspect of Geburah. And what the Torah is telling us here is that basically these are corrections that are happening. These are things that these characters that we're reading in the Torah are basically forces, are parsufim, doing corrections. Some of them, probably break. Some of them lose their light, like it happened when Pinchas killed Simri and Cosby. Killing means, he basically took the light out of this parsuf, and this parsuf basically is considered dead. Okay, it's a parsuf that has no screen, no masach anymore, so therefore it's considered dead or broken. Okay, so we see on chapter 27, verse 1, that the daughters of Zelophehad approached Moshe. And the reason they approached Moshe was because their father died. Their father didn't have a male son. And basically there was no one to inherit the portion of their father. And according to the law, only males were supposed to inherit the portion of their fathers. Yet this person had 5 daughters, and these 5 daughters found themselves in a position that they needed to plead to Moshe for them to be the receivers of this inheritance. So the Arizal tells us that Zelofehad personifies the source of 5 states of Geburah. This is alluded by the letter in his name, that when you spell them, they are spelled as the shadow of fear of Tzelpahad. His 5 daughters personify 5 states of Geburah, like we said, and these 5 states of Geburah in Binah, they're in Binah and Da'at, and which then become Geburah, components of Geburah, in the 5 principal sephirot of the emotion, which is Chesed to Hod. So from Chesed to Hod, we got Chesed, Geburah, Tifaret, Nesat, and Hod. And what you need to understand is that it stops right there in Hod, right? So they remain within the Yesod of Serampin. They do not enter Malchut, so they don't go lower than Serampin. They're still in a state of, we would say, bestowal, not in a state of reception, egoistical reception. So what we see is that the first set of states of Geburah that descend from Ima, the Serampin, and here we're talking a little bit advanced, but if you take the lessons, the intermediate lessons, and then the advanced lessons, and you will understand. They remain within it. So the Geburah that descend from Ima, the Serampin, they remain within it until they are sweetened by the states of Chesed within Serampin. They're then transferred to Nukva. So these 5 states of Geburah, they haven't been sweetened yet. They're still in Serampin, and they cannot be transferred to Nukva. They're still above the Yesod. They're stopped, right there within Yesod. This is the reason why Moshe was unsure, should they inherit the land? Should they be able to lower or go to Malchut, right? And because they're not sweetened yet. So God told him that since they do not shine into Malchut, they deserve a portion of the land. That means that the 5 states of Geburah, personified by Zelofehad, they deserve a portion of Malchut. But by portion, that means that probably not all of them are going to be able to shine within Malchut, So these 5 states of Geburah, 3 of them are sweetened. And by the state of Chesed, within Serampin, and there are 2 that are not. The 3 that are sweetened are personified by the daughters Hagla, Milka, and Tirza. This is because Hagla means she has a holiday, Hagla. She celebrates because she is sweetened. Milka, names indicate her essence, so indicates she's a queen, sovereignty. Tirza means will or loving kindness. They're the other 2 that are not sweetened, and that's Mahla and Noah. And Mahla can be interpreted to mean she will be wiped out, similar to the wiped out Beimach of all life. This is on Genesis chapter 7. Noah is similar to the word meaning swaying. In the verse, the earth is swaying like a drunkard. It is rocking to and fro like a hot. Its iniquity shall weigh it down, and it shall fall to rise no more. This is from Isaiah chapter 24. So this is the reason why only the first 3 were allowed to basically have a portion. Not all 5 were able to go and shine into Malchut. And what we see here is the following, is that these 5 Geburot, they're within or up there in the world of the Parsuf Seramping, and they needed to be sweetened, meaning when you have the light of Or Chokmah, it needs to be enveloped, it needs to be clothed by Or Hasidim, meaning Chokmah needs to be clothed by Bina in order to go down to the lower Parsuf. In this case, these lights were not ready to go down to Malchut and shine within Malchut. They needed to be somehow clothed, or clothe the life of wisdom in order to serve as a channel for the life of wisdom in Malchut, because there's an absence of the male aspect in it. But they were allowed a portion of the land, and the reason is because they're above Yesod. And what we need to learn is from this is there's a whole bunch of other secrets that we can talk about, with these 5 Sefirot or Geburot that we're talking about. But it's for you to have an idea that each character that we're reading in the Torah has a meaning in this correction that the children of Israel are supposed to do. So we have Pinchas on one side doing corrections, utilizing these 13 aspects of mercy, which we spoke before in other parshas, that Moshe used 13 aspects of mercy in order to not have the children of Israel being punished for a sin. Yet in another time he only uses 9. Yet this time we see Pinchas somehow using 13 in order to correct another sin done by the children of Israel. Then we have this aspect of Geburot, the 5 aspects of Geburot. So this aspect of Geburot, there's also something called Mansepach, which is very advanced Kabbalah. I'm not gonna touch the subject here, but that's what you need to think about. These 5 women, that's 5 daughters, what they mean actually with that is 5 forces of Geburot, and how these forces of Geburot are gonna play a role within the children of Israel. And we need to ask ourselves why they're talking about these 5 forces of Geburot in this parsha. Why they're talking about that after the census? Why they're talking about that after Pinchas corrections? And then after that, why then Joshua succeeded Moshe? And these things are related. We're talking about how the light is coming down, making corrections, using these different parsuf or characters in the Torah to make corrections, so we can then at this time ourselves look at the Torah as an instruction and make these corrections within ourselves. So these 5 Geburot, this Pinchas, this even Zimri and Cosby, this nation of Moab, it's there within ourselves. There's also the aspects of Joshua, who takes over Moshe. He's in a lower level, but he's still, a spiritual parsuf that will lead us towards the land of Israel, towards that level of Atzilut. So this is what's happening here. Sweetening these Geburot means creating balance. Pinchas making his correction means creating balance. Joshua leading the people of Israel means this guy was chosen. You remember his name was Joshua, but then Moshe changed his name to Yehoshua, and which means basically salvation. And he was able to take or lead the people to the land of Israel and continue corrections there, because remember, they not just entered, they continue some wars with other nations. And the parsha ends with the daily offerings. And the daily offerings, what we need to look at it is in the following way. There 3 times a day that the religion of Judaism, and there are other religions that do the same thing, that tell us that we need to meditate on these offerings, and to make sure that these offerings are done correctly within our heart. Okay, we don't have the temple anymore, but we have now the words. Now believe it or not, we're now in an aspect in which we don't have to perform actions. We can speak about those actions, and it's like we're doing them. Remember when we talk about the rock? What was asked of Moshe was the following: speak to the rock, and water will come out of the rock. Yet Moshe hit the rock twice. Remember we mentioned hitting the rock the first time, it was the Mishnah. Hitting the rock twice was the Talmud, and that's the oral Torah that was supposed to be transmitted from mouth to ear, and the staff was the written Torah. So what's happening is, because of that action, we still to this day, I will say paying the price, but receiving the ripple effect of those actions, to the point that now we have these actions that were performed in the temple not only written down, but we have to recite them somehow. And by reciting those actions, by speaking to the rock, we will bring the waters of mercy. We will bring the waters of mercy from the rock, from the Shekhinah. Okay? So that's the meaning, basically, when we read the end of this parsha, when we read about the offerings for Shabbat or Chodesh, about the other holidays in this parsha. So it's basically telling us this is how it needs to be done. There's actions to be performed after that, physical actions. But eventually, even though there's a fall of the 2 temples, which are spiritually basically the breakings of the vessel, and that's something to be taught in a different lesson, because it's a very important lesson, but also a long lesson to talk about why the 2 temples were destroyed, and also at the same time the 9 of Av. These actions now being performed by our hearts means a lot, and this is what the Torah is all about. The first letter in the Torah is a Bet, the last letter is a Lamed, for a reason. It means Lev. It means Lev in English is heart. It means that all this Torah that we're reading, it's supposed to be about our heart, about our desire, about who we are, about what we need to do internally. And what we need to understand is that everything that we're reading should not be taken literally, but should be taken as an instruction. So the Pinchas situation was, or is, a correction that we need to do inside ourselves. There's a meditation about it that the Arizal has, correcting anger is called. And the senses, remember what I said before, by doing these corrections, we are counted within the members of the children of Israel. That we're not counted outside as a nation, we're counted as part of Israel. Yashar Kel, the one that's looking for a direct path towards El, towards God. And then the lottery, what does that mean? The daughters of Selafhat, 5 Geburot, what does that mean within me? How do I correct that? How do I sweeten those Geburot? How do I put Chesed with those Geburot in order to gain, this balance? Joshua, who's Yehoshua, within me? How this force of Yehoshua, this person of Yehoshua within me, can lead me to a higher spiritual level. In this case, the land of Israel is the level of Atzilut. And then the daily offerings, and how these offerings are recited today, even though there were actions in the past, how they were recited today. How should I meditate on these offerings in order to make an offering with my heart, make an offering with all that I have, with all my being, with all my soul, and also with all the actions that I do every day, whether with my family, work, or in society. So think about that. I'll leave you there with that thought. I'll see you in the next Parsha, and in the next Parsha, we're gonna be talking about, it's gonna be Parsha Matot, and once again, we're gonna be talking about oaths and swearing. When you swear an oath to establish a prohibition upon himself, these also restrictions. So it's also geburot, and we're gonna talk about that. So I'll see you in the next parsha. If you're seeing me before Shabbat, Shabbat Shalom, and I'll see you next time. Later out.